Welcome. As all of you are here from this first program in Antioquia, it is a pleasure to be with you. If you want to be informed, we will be talking about this monothematic topic, but obviously at the end you will see the information that happened during the day. We want to bring you a different content where we sit, think, analyze, and we will see if we can surprise you with this topic. Well, we will enter a topic that I think generates a lot of concern, not to think that we are alone in this universe. It's almost impossible. It would be the strangest thing in the world, but on a single planet in this universe of billions of stars and planets and thinking we are being alone.
And also about the movies. And my comments has not been biased to imagine that everything from outside is bad, and maybe it's not.
The thing is that if one sees a different race out there and is scared and says that we are not alone on this planet or in this universe,
And also generates many expectation about those paranormal encounters that they call in the movies and influences a lot.
many say that the movies are futuristic, or all the things we see in movies many years ago have happened. But we don't really know why we haven't had a chance to see them or to have contact or anything like that. The only experience that I have had in my life are deja vus, from which I have had in many occasions. I have been here before but never happened. But beyond that, I have only seen satellites. But I would like to, just as I like the earthquakes and I like hurricanes. Don Sixto Jose Paz Wells, welcome and thank you for being here from Peru. How about the national team? Do you think they'll go to the World Cup?
We thank Colombia for the favor as well.
Someone told me about the periodic table. You do know what it is, right? That would not even be the 1% that could come into existence in the universe and many other things. And when we think about spaceships or other things, my God, what we still need to discover, how true is this?
Well, let's remember that only 40 years ago, scientists considered space to be empty, that there was nothing between planets and stars, that the only proven solar system was ours. So it was not certain that other stars had planets and they formed solar systems. That is 40 years ago. It was thought that the stars were adorned in the sky, so that one at night just had a romantic time. It was thought that the only planet with living conditions or with water was Earth, in such a way that we could be kind of the unique case in the entire universe. So if humans would get to nuclear detonate us by someone's madness and we end life, could this mean that the creation failed, which was useless? Now, in 2013, the NASA Kepler space probe detected that in the Milky Way alone, there were 17 billion planets with the possibility of life like our galaxy. Only in this galaxy. And there are hundreds of billions of galaxies like ours. Now, just in February of 2013, the Hubble Space Telescope discovered the first exoplanet in a planet outside of our solar system that is 100% water. Earth is 75% water. This planet was 100% water, and in 2014, if you remember, NASA gave 5 planets with living conditions. 5 exoplanets that have the possibility where humanity, in the event that we ended life on our planet, we could emigrate there. It is likely that in these 5 exoplanets, one was at 12.6 light years away, relatively close to us, another one at 22.5 light years from this planet. There was 100% water. Then there was another that was more or less about almost 500 light years away. Another one was at 1200 and another one at 1600 light years away. One says that, those distances are enormous. It is impossible that someday we can get there. However, Miguel Alcubierre, a Mexican scientist in the mid-1990s, he developed an engine, the technology of the plasma motors. This technology already exists, by which we could get to travel through the universe at really amazing speeds. It is said, according to the physics, that it is impossible to travel faster than light speed, almost 300,000 kilometers per second, because we would transform ourselves into light, and then there would not be nothing to unite us again. So NASA, from the discovery of Alcubierre, has developed a type of ship that manages to create a kind of capsule that is like a ring. The ship is inside the ring, and then this creates insulation for the ship and would allow for the plasma engines. It would be possible traveling at 10 times the speed of light, so we could reach the exoplanet more close to our solar system, which is a planet that revolves around the alpha star of Centaur. That is, the Centaur is a binary star, and it has now been discovered in 2012 that in the strip of habitable planets, and it has now been discovered in 2012 that in that strip, not too close to a star, not too far from it to have conditions, there is a planet that has oceans like Earth and that has rocky continents, has an acceptable atmosphere, just that it's a bigger planet than ours and that might be livable, and it's the closest one to us at only 4.2 light years. We would reach the nearest planet in 2 weeks. In just 2 weeks. 15 days to reach the closest one to us. But
When is this being planned for?
that is the problem. It is still in the experimental phase. The plasma engines and the ship, the design and the prototype exists, but the structure has not yet been made, and it must be seen that the plasma motors are compatible with this technology of the ring that really isolates the ship.
So that would explain, Mr. Boss, the travels of those things that people say they see. You're going to tell us about your experience of your trip to Ganymede. What would be the kind of technology they use to get from planets so far away to Earth?
Let's remember one thing. We live in a universe without limits. The only limit is our ignorance. What was impossible for us 40 years ago today is a reality. We have discovered that the space is not empty. It's filled with cosmic dust from dark matter, cloud of organic molecules. The raw material for life is plaguing the universe, and the meteorites and comets drag organic molecules and bombard the worlds as if they were cosmic sperm fertilizing the eggs. Today, the scientific community recognizes that the life process that occurred here on Earth must be common throughout the universe. Later, it was discovered that water is common in all the universe. It's more, it has been discovered that the moon in 2009 has as much water as the Earth, only that underground the moon, and there are craters on the surface that have been even lakes of frozen water of 300 meters in diameter, for which the survival of communities is assured of humans on the moon. Many people wonder why, after Apollo 17, we did not return to the moon, because there was no way to secure our permanent colony on the moon, and that's why it was used to make geological measurements. This blew up missiles that was made, ripping the crust of the moon to see how good it was. Today is known to have as much water as the Earth. You will remember that the Cassini probe that was sent precisely by NASA to Saturn has 60 moons. We only have one. Saturn 60. One of them is only 500 kilometers in diameter. It's called Enceladus and has geysers launching water vaporized at 40 kilometers of altitude. You go to the national parks and you remember a geyser that threw up a 20-meter away geyser, and everybody is applauding. Here in Encelado, it throws water to 40 kilometers away and nobody applauds because we don't even see it.
Please allow us, because you are giving us a lot of information. Let me ask you something. Who more or less understands it like that? Time and space. Both are correlated. Currently, when you say that one goes at the speed of light, you lose everything, because in 1 second you travel 300,000 kilometers. And I can't say I'm here, because when I say I'm here, I spend 300,000 kilometers farther. That is more or less the theory, correct? The organism that the human being has a cycle of time and life agreed with the cycle of Earth at 24 hours and all this. What can you tell me about this? Because
a while ago, something very interesting was being discussed, such as the déjà vus. That is, the human being has psychic potentials. Impressive. That is, Harry Potter is nothing compared to any of us. Because not only can we communicate with the word, but also with the mind. That is called telepathy. You can see with the eyes, but also with the mind. Or it's called clairvoyance. You can touch an object, and through the touch, to know if it's rough, smooth, or cold or hot. Through the touch, to know if it's rough, smooth, or cold or hot. Through the touch, you can know the history of the object, to who it belonged, if the owner of the object is alive, is dead, is close, is far. Interpol, Scotland Yard, FBI use psychic to solve criminal cases that cannot be solved through the normal way. This is called dermoptic, dermo skin, optic vision, vision through the skin. While psychic faculties are premonition or precognition, the ability to anticipate the future, that is, how many people did not go to work to the Twin Towers on the day of the attacks? By the time this happened, there had to be 50,000 people in the towers, and among the people who died and disappeared, it was about 3,000. The people had a premonition to anticipate misfortunes, like a cognition of prior knowledge of things we dream at night. Much dreams are not mere imagination. There are dreams that are true experiences in another dimension, are called astral travel. There are dreams that are premonitories or precognitories, the ability to anticipate the future. How many people stopped going to work in the Twin Towers on the day of the attack because they felt a revolt in the belly, where it is not only on the right side of the brain where the emotional intelligence is, also in the belly. People felt anguish and did not go to work. By the time they would have gone to work, there should have been 50,000 people in the towers, and among the people who died and disappeared, 3,000. What happened? People had a premonition to anticipate misfortunes, or cognition, prior knowledge of things we dream at night. Much of the dreams are not mere imagination. There are dreams that are true experiences in another dimension, which are called astral travel. There are dreams that are premonitory or precognitive, anticipating of what will happen to you, or so that you are prepared for when this happens. There are dreams that would be memories of past lives. For those of us who believe in reincarnation, it would be interesting to delve into that later. There are dreams that are imagination, subconscious outcrop. When you wake up, you forget what you dreamed of, and suddenly, when the situation that I had anticipated occurs, you say that I had already experienced this. I had dreamed this. I had never been here. However, I know that behind this wall there is a tower, or there is a well, or there is a pool, and it is there. Everything is. And how you have known it. Past lives, or because you had that precognition, or conditioned prior knowledge of things. Exists the possibility to really travel through time and space, because the universe, it's not really the idea that everything we have done, things don't work just like you were saying about the periodic table of the elements. Because in the space, how much more things there will be. Every night, when we look at the sky, we see neither the present nor the future. What we see at night is the past. The stars, the planets are so far from us that what we're seeing already happened. As you do to the migration to the system, many of those stars don't exist anymore.
Like the gravitational waves that arrived a little bit ago.
Precisely. On March 3rd of 2009, the gravitation wave detector of Hanover in Germany, the GEO 600, detected sounds from the far reaches of the universe that led scientist Craig Hogan to conclude through computers that we live on a hologram, in a virtual reality, in a large-scale simulation. In 2014, because of the quantum physics, the particle physics, Michio Kaku, who is an American scientist with Japanese parents who has a television show on the Discovery Channel, stated that we live in a kind of a parallel reality. Stephen Hawking had already said that there are parallel universes, and that he does not dislike thinking that there would be another Stephen Hawking living in those parallel universes. Thousands of years ago in India, it was said that the human being has 7 bodies, and this is who you are living, all this material reality. When you sleep, you live another parallel reality in the astral. But you can also live another parallel reality in the mental, in the soul, in the spirit. That is, we live in parallel universes.
Why the denial? Is not easy to try to understand that? and how it occurs and how to appropriate the subject instead of denying it? Why must people, governments, even pretend and then denying instead of understanding it?
Many label them as pseudoscience or
Any knowledge that you have that the others don't gives you a power and advantage over the rest. The control of the information is the advantage in the modern world. We are in the aquarium age. According to the esotericists, before there was little information. Now there is too much information, and it is very difficult to know that everything that circulates around is true. Circulates truths, half truths, lies, in all revolts today to access the truth. You have to use intuition, imagination, and intelligence, or intuition, instinct, and intelligence. Therefore, you can't believe everything, nor you can reject everything either. When you find that May 13, 2008, a very sensitive date for the Catholic Church because it remembers the appearance of the Virgin of Fatima, Jose Gabriel Funes, the highest astronomical authority in the Vatican, a Jesuit, one of an Argentine origin. Now it is fashionable to be a Jesuit and an Argentine. So this is the scientist in charge of the observatory in Castel Gandolfo in Rome. Declare to the Daily Roman Observatory that it is the official means of the Vatican, that the Vatican accepts extraterrestrial life, and that it is as lawful for a Catholic to believe in God as to believe in aliens. Holy God, what kind of world are we living in? When Stephen Hawking was interviewed in 2014 for the Discovery Channel, and he always communicating through a computer because he can't speak, unfortunately has a disease that has him in a wheelchair, he stated that he is convinced that aliens exist, but recommends that we do not try to have contact with them because they could come invading or conquering us. If they came with bad intentions, they would have made us dust long ago. And they are visiting us from immemorial times because all the myths and legends from the ancient peoples speak of gods sent or angels who came and promised to return one day.
But in a certain way, why is the interest of government to hide that information?
The first reason is because it does not matter to the military whether they are aliens or foreigners. From the moment that an identified flying object invades your airspace without you being able to avoid it is a national security problem. So facing the taxpayers, you are making a fool of yourself because you cannot avoid it. Why there are borders, why is there military if they are like a strainer, like a drainer? Everything goes through. On the other hand, the most prosperous business at the time that only competes in profitability with the international drug trafficking is the sale of weapons. If it is shown that these beings exist and do not come with bad intentions, this would force the countries of the world to unite as a single great nation, as a single great world government that could be the United Nations. The borders would disappear, as well as the sale of weapons. Also, the foreign debt would disappear. There would not be one who to owe it to. Poverty would disappear in the world, but there are those who do not want this to happen. Naturally, what happens if these beings share with us cutting edge technology? What if they tell us that with just a little quartz crystal, we can extract the energy from 1,000,000 barrels of oil or 2 nuclear power plants? What would happen to the exporting countries? Or countries exporting nuclear or petroleum energy on the other hand? What if we talk about free energy? That all the stars are radiating energy in the universe and the energy is there. All you would need is just an energy accumulator, a capacitor, to have energy indefinitely. There would be no owner, and there are no owners, there are no large companies that control all this. There will be no owners, and there are no owners and no large companies that control all this, right? Now, and also, how about our religions? Why, if our religion leaders are in contact with the divinity that I do not doubt they do, why they never told us the faithful who had brothers on other planets? If they knew why they hid it, and if they did not know it, Why didn't they? Aren't they inspired by the boss? In 1999, Monsignor Corrado Balducci, theologian from the Vatican, cardinal to the Catholic Church, and personal friend of the Pope John Paul, appeared on the RIA, Italian radio on television, and he declared the current position of the Catholic Church. In 1999, facing the UFO issue is accepting the possibility that in such a large universe we're not alone, and that the angels of the past could be the aliens of today. Holy God, how times have changed.
Where do we find out about the reincarnation, premonitions in virtual reality, and parallel reality with the UFO phenomenon?
If we're talking to us about extraterrestrial beings and of people who claim to have had the experience of extraterrestrial contact and have been able to verify it, not only us along the 43 years of research and experiences together with the contact group, because this is not only Sixto stories. It happened to a collective of people in which I am only one more. 10 times we have invited the press to schedule meetings with them with anticipation. The first journalist who accompanied us in the year 74 was Juan Jose Benitez, the world-famous author of The Trojan Horses, the book series. When he was only one more press correspondent to the EFE agency, was sent to Peru to cover the unusual news of a group of young people that we were back then 43 years ago, who said to have extraterrestrial contact through meditation and through psychography or automatic writing, which is a form of instrumentalized telepathy. As background, my father investigated this as a hobby before I was born. My father was a scientific advisor in aeronautics and astronomy of the Peruvian Air Force. My father was a personal friend in Germany of Hermann Ober, the professor of Baden-Württemberg Brown, the creator of the Saturn V, who took the man to the moon. My father was a personal friend of Neil Armstrong, and he told my dad, Mr. Carlos, on the moon we have seen things that we cannot tell. It's not true that they did not reach the moon. Yes, they got to the moon, but they did not say everything they saw. These experiences of contact has allowed us to take the press 10 times. If you go into YouTube with my name, Sixto Paz Wells, there are a series of videos of the times we have invited the press where the journalists themselves have filmed the appearance of the objects in full daylight. Not at night time with a strange little light. No. The object captured, and the most interesting thing, on the last video filmed by Televisa from Mexico, the journalist came with us to a place, public place, like Teotihuacan pyramids in Mexico. A tourist place in front of thousands of tourists, from 10:30 in the morning to 5:30 in the afternoon. Then the journalists say, well, Sixto Paz has invited us because he says that something is going to appear, who knows? And so, on an ironical, sarcastic way, at the end of the video, you can hear them saying, it was 6 objects that appeared. It was incredible in the sky, making evolutions. So at the end of the video, the journalist said, there were 6 objects. This was amazing. Now, this shows not so much that we are the great contactees or that our experience is unique. There are many people in the world who are having this contact. What happens is that not everyone dares to say it. Not everyone in the world tells it. Now, in these contacts, we have had the opportunity to see them physically. Today, we know that there are 60 different races that are coming to Earth. There are beings 3 meters high. There's a series of videos of the times we have invited the press, where the journalists themselves, we have not filmed the appearance of the objects in broad daylight. Not at night, a rare little light. No. The object captured. And the most interesting, for example, was that the last video that was filmed by television in Mexico, the journalist came with us. There are beings 3 meters high. There are beings 2.5 meters, 2 meters 90, 1 meter 80, a meter 50, a meter 20, 1 meter, 80 centimeters, 60, and 10 centimeters. So they were mistaken for goblins, gnomes in the past, because they were tiny. Now, there are beings with a humanoid anthropomorphic aspect. There are extraterrestrial black beings, white, blue beings. There are half greenish, grayish. There are also beings of zoomorphic aspect, beings that appear anthropomorphized reptiles with tails and everything. There are felinoid beings. They seem felines. Today, no director of Hollywood dares to make a script of any movie. Besides, I have had the opportunity to be in the Burbank studios in Hollywood, sitting in front of directors like Joseph Randazzo and the writers and everything, and tell them the content experience. And years later, I saw that many of the things I told them were in the movies. You were talking a moment ago about the alien and the eighth passenger. Maybe the alien. If you know the script, they are a genetic manipulation of a humanoid extraterrestrial race that planted us on this planet. And in case we escape their control, they created the aliens to control us, to exterminate us. They were the mechanism to end humanity in the event that humanity escaped their control. It is not that they were natural beings that appeared in the world. Nature is fierce and aggressive, but not as bad as we are.
Sixto, when you talk about that number of 60 races that come to Earth, when they come, do we confuse these aliens with ordinary human beings? Tell us about Vladimir Putin, who is an enigmatic figure and a mystery. Because there is a whole mystery around the presence of this character that makes Vladimir Putin a person who has a mystery around him.
What it is that Putin has privileged information. He was the highest authority of the KGB and therefore had access to information than others, like the prime minister of the president, not handled by the presidents of Russia, because for the most part, they did not have either the preparation and the capacity and interest in certain information. He has privileged information, and in a world like ours, that gives him a power far greater than material or economic wealth than others. Well, what happens is that with the extraterrestrials with whom we have been in contact with, 25,000 years of ours, two great civilizations that were in charge of our planet as guardians and watchers, some beings from Orion and others from Pleiades, fought among themselves. In other words, a group of extraterrestrial civilizations considered that human beings on Earth that had been sown on this planet some billions of years ago, but some 25,000 years ago, we were dangerous and could endanger the cosmic order because we were a corrected and improved version of them, so they wanted to cancel the project, the cosmic plan. That concentrated its attention on our planet. Others, on the contrary, they considered that human beings can be the key to get them out of this sort of evolutionary stagnation in which they find themselves. They have advanced a lot mentally and technologically, but at the cost of sacrificing emotions and feelings. Some were against it, others in favor of the plan. They fought among themselves. The echoes of that cosmic war still resonates in humanity, to an extent that the Bible tells us about the war of the children of the light against the children of darkness. The angel wars, the Mahabharata, the Ramayana talks about the war of the gods and the semi-gods with spaceships called Vimanas. For example, the Greek mythology tells us about the war of the Titans that ended that a group of Greek gods were deported and exiled to Earth. And so many myths and legends tells us this exactly the same. So a group of these beings coming from Orion with reptile-like appearance were deported. Their leader called Satanel, Satan or Satanas. And this reptilian-looking alien today, after leading this descent with the leaders, were left in one place on Earth, which is what we now call as Easter Island or Rapa Nui, with their myths and legends of the Rapa Nui, the Maoris. They tell us that the first inhabitants of the island were the lizard men, who were left in a kind of a luminous pearl that came from the sky and landed in the interior of the Ranoraraku volcano, the quarry of the Moai. But that is another story to avoid going too far. These beings used to live thousands of years outside manipulating people of weak character and will, were trapped in placing them in another dimension, religion, like a series of some kind of ghosts, in the military, and these beings have been constituted. How would you explain that suddenly a person who has gone bankrupt 4 times his businesses be in front of the most powerful nation on the planet, like for him to bankrupt the country and the world economy? How can it be possible that a country like Venezuela, with the great industrial development that it had, with groups like the Great Universal Brotherhood, like Connie Mendez, please, people, with an esotericism and knowledge that is in the hands of people with so many problems? This explains well then, and really, because there are people who are demonically possessed, and that is the only explanation. Then there is a negative, dark world secret government that is there is not people like that if you take off their mask are reptiles. No. Let's leave out the television type of invasion and encounters of the 6 type series. No. There are people that are possessed, and possession does exist.
And that negative government, where is it?
Well, it is spread throughout the world. There are 13 families, 13 clans, so to speak, and around 300 families. Some of them are beings who have incarnated in this planet and are called the Illuminati. In the second half of the 18th century, Adam by Wainspawn and Baron Nathan the Rothschild founded the sect of the Enlightened of Baviera, but previously they had already been acting through other mechanisms. So the Illuminati, because they really assert an action, that is, they are always behind the scenes, and they are not the ones in the front row. The Bush, for example, are only servants of this.
There are the Rockefellers, for example.
Yes, but as I say, they are not the people many times who are in the first row, like Kissinger.
Please answer me this question. Don't they ever have a camera or a cell phone? Why is this not so viral? Sorry, I wanted to talk about those experiments, those test tube babies, those nurseries. Does that have to do with the Anunnaki? Or do you not believe in Anunnakis? The powerful beings that came, is that what you are talking about?
Yes, we have them, but it does not come out. That is, you take your camera and the film, and your battery drains instantly. When it was used, the photographic rolls, the testimony are in the full pages. For example, in the newspaper of '89, the first time we invited the press in the desert in the south of Peru, 40 journalists from 8 countries came. Among them, Leticia Bayava from Channel 51 Telemundo of Miami, Jose Gray from Channel 23 Univision, Beatriz Parga from the Miami Herald, and much more. The ship appeared. We saw about 80 meters above the ground. They grabbed all the possible cameras at the time. They were with rolls, like prehistoric times. The photographs were already taken, and only the first photo from each photographic roll of each camera came out. Told us the rest were this great metamorphoses. The video cameras taped and the batteries started draining. The people from the press told me Sixto at least an hour-long documentary worldwide with this would be spectacular. They went to the Sheraton Hotel in Lima, which was their headquarters of the journalists there in Lima, and they telephoned their channels. We have it. We have filmed it. When they got to Miami, Channel 23, Univision, Channel 51, and Telemundo, they found that the people from the U.S. government, the famous men in black, have already arrived and told the management of both channels that they were waiting for the footage to be delivered to them to review them previously. They were returned clipped, and the maximum allowed to journalists was 3 minutes on a local newscast. From there, they called me to Lima and told me, Sixto, if we had not experienced the information censorship in our own flesh, we would continue to think that when it is said that there is a whole policy of covering up the UFO phenomena, it is a kind of paranoia that accompanies those contactees. It is simply said to cache the topic, give it importance. Now we know they have censored us.
Well, yes. We in education, it is not really possible to find a logic or a sense. Why these natural disasters and why in a certain regions people are more affected than others?
where I had the opportunity to travel with them too. I've accompanied them on a ship as well. It was an incredible journey. They just communicate with us through psychography and through meditation. My wife, Marinita, with whom I have been married for 40 years, plus we have been dating for 7 years as well. She's the best friend I have. She has also lived the experiences of contact with me. Well, she received a message in which these beings were waiting for me to accompany them, and I do not think she received the message because she wanted to get rid of me. No, the relationship is very good. So, I went in the company of a group of people. We went to the desert, and behind the hills, an object in the shape of a disc of bright green color appeared, which passed over us, and when it was already moving away, it threw a beam of light which fell from, like in a diagonally form, over me. It was like a beam like about 1.5 meters around me of a bright blue color. For a moment, I was lifted up. Not a minute passed when a kind of a hatch or manhole cover of about 3 meters in diameter was closed under me with 3 concentric circles, and from a central point, several rays came out. And when the intensity of the light was lowered, I could see that the light came from a kind of a pyramidal crystal suspended in a vaulted ceiling. I was in a circular room with rectangular red lights around. The floor was like a mirror, and since no one was coming, and as much as one knows that they are good people, that they come with good vibes, you're always afraid of the unknown. Then, in front of me, it had opened like a luminous oval door. I tried to advance as I could. When I managed to look through that door, I saw that it was like a hexagonal room, with a false ceiling composed of inverted pyramids with a wide quadrangular base of an orange color. To the right and left of this hexagonal room, there were 3 levels of screens. The funny thing was that the screens were not flat or convex, but slightly concave, like they have them today. But this was back then in '86. And at the bottom of the screens, I have seen some small white desks full of shiny discs. In the center of the room were 2 large cylinders, half down dark, half up rhombus and transparent. And inside were metal tubes with mineral fragments inside. Since I couldn't see anyone, I entered the room, and the floor wasn't hard. The color was like a mustard yellow padding. I approached the desks on the left side, and as I did not see any image on these supposed screens, I did not know how I dared to place my finger on one of these shiny discs. And then suddenly, when I touched them, a type of image would appear where they would say, hey, feel free, comfortable, as if you were in your ship. And well, what happened is that I could not remove my finger. I began to feel cramps in my arm, and I could not get it out. And I began to feel anguish, thinking now these beings are going to enter here, and they are going to find me with my finger stuck in their controls. And I came to think more for a moment, more about them than on my finger, and I could already removed it. And scared, I went to the center of the room and said, if you have invited me, where are you? And in front of me, which was completely a smooth wall, it was some down like there was like a hatch, and with a very powerful light and the silhouette of 4 beings, one about 6 feet tall, sturdy, and 3 others about 6 feet with big heads. Then the only thing that I did was to go back and say hello, but they were immobile still. And I said, oh my, maybe they were looking at me, putting my finger in their controls, and they're already upset. Then the tallest one came walking towards me. He had a shiny suit that only showed his face and hands. The appearance he had was like that of Oriental, like a Korean or a Mongolian. Markedly slanted eyes, very pronounced cheekbones, white face, and suddenly he began to speak in perfect Spanish, which surprised me. Because in previous contacts, the communication was always mental, and you understand how they're talking to you. Not here. I speak slowly and slowly in Spanish. He told me not to be afraid, that I would be with them for an hour, and that soon I would accompany them to Ganymede. While he was talking to me, the other three smaller and stubborn beings began to move around the room. The funny thing is that as they moved around the room, they grew up in size and shrunk in size, which seemed very strange to me. They had bright outfits identical to this other being, only their faces were white as milk, and their eyes were dark and occupying a third of their faces. The nose was only two holes, and the upper lip covered the lower lip in such a way that it seemed that they had no mouth, with very long arms, especially the fingers that reached almost the knees. One of them, who passed very close to me, I felt that they did not have life like ours, that they were like some type of android or robot. Then one who passed very close came bringing a kind of a golden metallic rectangular box. It was like a box. Later I realized that there were like rings at one end, and it was more like a metal plates or plates and full of strange ideograms. When the other being told me, look, this is part of your history, of your world history. There will come a day when the humanity on Earth will know that you are the result of more than one extraterrestrial genetic experiment. But not like a rat laboratory, but something like a test tube baby. And our world is not like a farm, but a kind of a nursery or kindergarten, where they would be trying to innovate a different form of education that allows them to learn things through us over time, because there is no one, no matter how wise they are, that does not have anything or something to learn, and no one, no matter how humble you are, who does not have something to teach. Throughout our history, there has been hybridization and misgeneration between extraterrestrials and human beings from Earth, and not from one civilization, from several. There have been stellar shipwrecks, alien colonization, and even deportation of aliens to our world, after real Star Wars, who have had our world as a neutral setting for their battles. Unfortunately, you have the wrong idea that climate change is a product of human-generated environmental pollution. That is not true. The contamination made by the human beings, what it's doing is accelerating a process of deterioration of the environment and is making certain disasters that would inevitably occur, product of a cosmic cycle, they are much more violent. In this book, which is the 20th that I have published, which is called The Sanctuary on Earth, I mention all that information that the extraterrestrials told us about this great metamorphosis or planetary mutation. According to the extraterrestrials, every 26,000 years, our planet receives a pulse from the center of the galaxy. An energy of violet light is the energy of the transmutation. Mysticism, faith, magic, change. Darwin, when he developed the theory of the evolution of species, he knew that from time to time a large generalized mutation occurs on the planet. What he did not know was the periodicity with which that occurred and what caused it. But only those species able to adapt to change were the ones that survived. Today, scientists already know that every 26,000 years, the Mayas and the Chilam Balam of Chumayel in the fortune teller book or the jaguar sorcerer, where things were about to happen. They spoke about the synchronizing ray coming from the Hunapku of the center of the galaxy, that every 25,625 years came to our solar system.
Why that figure?
Because that figure is exactly the mathematical calculation. The Mayas were not prophets, they were mathematicians. And the Mayans already knew precisely that every 25,625 years, we received the pulse that came from the center of the galaxy. They had already achieved to detect now how, as if the Mayan civilization we do not give an antiquity superior to the 2,500 years already and the previous antecedents. 10,000, but in every ancient times, right? And we are really not talking about Mayans, but the ancestors properly of the Mayans. So as to be able to calculate what every 25,625 years happened. No, the wheel of the Bactuns. The Mayans said their ancestors came from the Pleiades and came to Earth through a large snake tail or hollow reed. It would be nothing other than the so-called wormholes or interdimensional portals, cosmic folds to travel through time and space. Now, the Mayans said that a pulse came from the center of the galaxy. 43 years ago, the extraterrestrials told us that every 26,000 years from the center of the galaxy, where there is a supermassive star, a pulse is produced, and that pulse reaches the solar system and affects the sun and makes the sun go into convulsions, increasing the solar storms, sunspots. That radiation affects each and every planet of the solar system, and when it reaches the Earth, it affects the Earth's magnetic field, minimizing it by heating the atmosphere, melting glaciers, melting poles, increasing the level of fresh ocean water with subsequent irrigation that the marine currents stop, and a drastic climate change takes place. With the subsequent risk after warming up, the planet suddenly freezes, and then all of North America and Europe could be under miles of ice. It could happen. Now, that radiation also affects the core of the planet and makes the planet suffer internal seizures, and the planet swells and suffer what is called the Great Tectonic Expansion. That pressures makes the magma come out of everywhere. That's why we are seeing the Earth, which is like a piece of the sun, in the process of cooling. It should have fewer volcanoes, less earthquakes, not more, less. Why in Chile, at the moment, there are 90 volcano cones active, with eruptions as violent as the Piué, the Chaitén, the Villarrica, the Calbuco, huge eruptions. Why all this is happening? Why the earthquakes? As the planet swells, the tectonic plates move away more violently from each other and collide more violently with each other. In the earthquake of Japan on March 11 of 2011, Japan and its islands sank within minutes, a meter, and they ran 2 meters 41 on the map. This by the theory of the continent drifts. Continent drift apart between continents between 1 and 3 centimeters each year. In a matter of minutes, they moved away 2 meters and 41. It was something violent. A tremendously violent thing in the case of Chile, for example. You remember in February of 2010, a terrible earthquake. The city of Concepcion, that was the epicenter, moved 8 meters to the west, and the entire continent also moved to the west, and the entire continent also moved to the mainland. So we are really living something that is not just climate change. I was just in a matter of 15 days in Ireland with a group of people in Ireland. Right now, the Ophelia is over Ireland and Scotland. The hurricanes that are forming near the Azores and go towards the Caribbean, they simply changed course and went up already. They went up to Scotland. What's happening with the planet? You saw the Harvey, for example. It flooded Texas. Texas that is semi-arid. We're seeing such terrible things already, and people are more worried about the football than what is happening on Earth.
What is the most privileged country in sighting? Peru, Ecuador, Europe?
Colombia. In the Sierra Nevada of Santa Marta, in all this area of Cabo de la Vela, in La Guajira, the ships appear even for pleasure. In the San Agustin area, in Huila, in the Tatacoa Desert, in the Huayca Stones, the Tota Lagoon, in Boyacá, we have seen the lagoon light up and the ship before our eyes, and we have even seen how dimensional portals have been formed. The ship projects a kind of light form, a luminous dome, and we have seen anthropomorphic humanoid beings and get out the interior, and not only us, to a very large group of people from various countries who have been summoned here to have a contact.
Sorry, I wanted to talk about those experiments. Those test tube babies, those nurseries. Does that have to do with the Anunnaki? Or do you not believe in Anunnakis?
First of all, my education is in history. I've studied history in the Catholic University in Peru. Then, in the Sumerian tablets that has an antiquity ranging from 5,500 to 6,000 years ago, there it states about the Sumerian gods. In this case, the children of An. An is the sky. So the son of An had children called Anunnaki, children of the sky. Among them, there is Elil, Elki, Usach, Inanna. Therefore, there is many of these gods. Some of them had sexual contact with humans on earth. In the case of example of Inanna, Istar, Astarte, were very popular girls among the boys of the earth many years ago. They had several love affairs. Well, the thing is that these beings came here to earth and did all kinds of experiments. Of that, they already mention it in the clay tablets. On symbolical biographical writing, later replicated in cuneiform script from the Eastern Akkadian era, half to Syrian, Persian, Babylon. Then, when there is smoke, there is fire. And those myths exist that really happened sometime in the past, so our planet has been the scene of real contact of these beings from heaven.
Do you know anybody who has had a similar experience?
Lots of people, like Markla, a Mexican contactee, also the case, for example, of Edward Millie Mayer in Switzerland, who had an extraordinary contacts. Enrique Castillo Rincon, who you met here, he was in Colombia. He came from Costa Rica. He had experience with beings from Pleiades. Well, there's a contactee in Bolivia, Luis Fernando Mostajo, a young contactee. Of course, the result is all the information that I am sharing with you. Just now, you were talking about the Area 51 in Wembley, Nevada. This was a base that was a satellite used in the Second World War, and that later it was used by the CIA to develop the entire project of the spy planes. And subsequently, in that place, the steel planes have been developing the entire project. That is the F-717, the F-111, the Black Mantle, the Blackbird, the B-2, Delta Wing. All of them has been developed there. There's a whole mysterious order in recent years. It was said that Area 51 did not exist. However, in 2012, the CIA declared that it did exist, only that it has nothing to do with the UFOs. If they had lied so much, why do you have to believe them now? That is, it has nothing to do with the UFOs. In Area 51, the technology of ships that have crashed on our planet since the famous case of the July 2nd of 1947, the famous case of Roswell, a ship that was shot down not by the terrestrial technology, but by other ships that are taking care of Earth from those who do not come with good intentions. That is, there's everything in the universe as there is on Earth, and there have been more than 38 ships that have crashed in various parts of the world. One of them was here in the Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta. There in Chile also was in Paiwano area in La Serena. A ship crashed, the famous Chilean Roswell, in 96 and 98. The dates are not very clear, but they have occurred. These are the ships that have crashed and that has allowed us to recycle part of the extraterrestrial technology, and that today we see it, for example, in carbon fiber and chip technology and many of the things that we have now developed there. They select the people they want to contact, but not because this or that person is a better person than the rest, because they know that through certain people they can reach a larger and wider group. What use would it be to them if they lived the experience and that for fear or ridicule they will never expose themselves? They will never tell about it. Now, when we started this in 1974, we were a group of young teenagers who had nothing to lose by recounting this experience. We had the advantage that my father investigated the UFO issue, and he was the platform through which the EFE agency became interested in our contact, and they sent Juan Jose Benitez to accompany us. My father, who was a world-renowned person in the field of aeronautics and astronomy, in all then he was the platform and the support Now, why they didn't reach my dad? They didn't get in touch with him because my father, with his scientific training, did a lot of field research, statistics, but it would never have occurred to him to go to the desert and have an experience of extraterrestrial contact. Or less, even use Hatha Yoga meditation to try an experience of contact. We took a step forward thanks to the support of my father, and it was that which allowed us the experience of contact. Now, from the first moment we shared the experience, the first one we invited to join us to verify that the contact was true was my father. My father, along with people from the Air Force, came with us to the desert. They were convinced that they were going to waste their time. They brought glasses, binoculars, they also brought telescopes. It looked like an astronomy session outdoors. And at the moment, a cylinder-shaped object appeared that we calculated averaged about 150 meters. It was leaning on its side. It straightened up, and at the speed of an airship, it passed over all of us. My father, from that moment, told us, and later he confessed to us, that it cannot be possible so many years investigating the UFO issue, and in the end, these beings come to have a contact with my children, and not with me. How unfair.
Sixto, how many times have they told you that you are crazy or insane?
Precisely. In 2006, we received the invitation for an extraordinary contact experience on Easter Island, one of the most enigmatic places on the planet Earth. And a psychiatrist, an advisor from the CEFA of the Chilean Air Force Phenomena Investigation Commission, Dr. Mario Duzuel, called me. And skeptically, he told me, Don Sixto, I have found out that you're going to go to this island that is part of the 5th region of Chile, and can I accompany you? Look, doctor, there are many people out there who consider that our group and I personally need a psychiatrist, and urgently. That, what better than you volunteered to accompany us? Then he came with us in the skeptical way, in the skeptical plan, but he agreed to meditate with us and everything. Then, in front of him, we received a message there on Easter Island that said what time of day and in what place on the island they were going to appear. Of course, the psychiatrist at that time thought that we were really crazy. So the day before we made the contact, we met with the military from the Mataveri airport in the town of Angaroa. And we told them, look, we're going to have this sighting at the foot of the Poike volcano next to the Ajo Tongariki, one of the ceremonial platforms, where there are 15 statues that are still standing, or that they have been put back on their feet. The military said, we're going to be attentive. Don Sixto, since I appear a lot on the Chilean television, they know a lot about me. So we went with the psychiatrist. We were 25 people, and 2 objects appeared. Please, don't believe me. Go to YouTube and put a UFO on Easter Island. The ship coming out of the interior of the volcano crater. And everyone saw it. And the military are giving their testimony. Then, already in the control tower with the military, they told me in front of the psychiatrist, Don Sixto, this was spectacular. We have recorded on our radar screen. And the psychiatrist, he can no longer say or argue that it was a mass hysteria or illusion. Today, the psychiatrist is no longer an advisor to the Air Force, but he is part of our group and meditates every day. One of the things we asked them first was how they did to travel the universe. Well, they tell us that just as when it rains between the mountains, the water gathers through the streams and forms streams, and the streams form rivers, and the rivers ends by the sea. All the stars are radiating energy in the universe, and that energy comes together, and great rivers of energy are formed that cross the entire universe, that are like a highway of energy. So they are located on these energy highways, and with the minimum impulse, they can reach high speeds. And just as every highway has a tunnel from section to section, in the universe there are interdimensional tunnels, folds, or portals. So they do not travel the universe mile by mile, but they fold the universe. They enter this part of the universe today and leave the other half of the universe yesterday. And when they return, they still arrive on time for lunch. In other words, the same beings that have been here on Earth 1,000,000 years ago or 100,000 years ago, or with Moses on top of the Mount Horeb or Sinai 3,400 years ago, they are the same beings that are now visiting us. Remember that in the book of Exodus, he describes that when Moses climbed to the top of Mount Horeb, under the cloud was a sea of bronze and glass. The cloud was hiding a metal object that had windows. Why doesn't the Bible say it was a flying saucer? Because they were technical terms that were not handled or used at that time. Elias was snatched away by a chariot of fire in front of an eyewitness, his disciple Elisha. Why don't you say it was an alien ship or a UFO? Well, it was a chariot of fire. In the book of Ezekiel, the glory of God is written that descended before Ezekiel in the Chebar River during the captivity after the Jews in Babylon. We're talking about the year 550 BC. Using Ezekiel's description, Dr. Joseph Blumrich from NASA, advisor on spacecraft design, led to the design of a vertical liftoff command module ship that was what Ezekiel saw 2,500 years ago. Angel in Greek means messenger. They involved any messenger. I go back to the words of Monsignor Corrado Balducci. The angels of the past could be the aliens of today. The first and basic message is if they have managed to survive us and go through stages of growth crisis like the one we are experiencing today, we should not fear why we are going to destroy ourselves. If they did it, why couldn't we? Only you have to discover the unlimited potential the human beings have. You will remember that on the 11th of the 11th of 2011, so that means the 11th of November, hundreds of thousands of people, millions of people worldwide joined in prayer and meditation to try to create a positive collective mental state that could reverse everything that had been said, announced, wrong, misinterpreted, that could happen in 2012. It has had misinterpreted the prophecy of the Mayans. Even Hollywood had contributed to the 2012 movie, a terrible movie that even the director dies. I mean, that's a terrible thing. And NASA had also said that for 2012, the most terrible solar storm was expected. Within the scale, it was going to be one of the most powerful and it was going to fry the planet. Well, people got together, prayed, meditated, and sent a lot of light between the 5th and the 6th of March 2012. The most terrible solar storm took place, just as NASA had announced. It was thought that the shock wave would reach the Earth in 24 hours and destroy all communication satellites, frying the planet. What happened? Nothing. Now, throughout the year 2012, more than 1,465 earthquakes were recorded between 5 and 8.6 degrees. How many people died in those 1,465 earthquakes? Only 1,000 people, less than one person per earthquake. Hey, it can't be. If in January of 2010, earthquake in Haiti that was 7 degrees, very close to the surface, very destructive, about 300,000 people died. How can it be possible that there have been 1,465 earthquakes between 5 and 8.6 degrees and only 1,000 people died? Because the residual effect of the critical mass did not prevent the events from happening, but they were as less traumatic as possible. That is why now that we are experiencing climate change, if people unite, if people connect, we can direct the events. The same happened with Hurricane Patricia. It was coming through the Mexican Pacific. It was a grade 7 hurricane. The maximum that the hurricanes reached was grade 5, with hurricane winds of 175 to 215 kilometers per hour. This was between 300 and 400 kilometers per hour. All the cities that were going to disappear from Mexico had already been calculated. People joined and prayed, meditated. They radiated a lot of light. UFOs also appeared on the Mexican Pacific coast, and overall, the hurricane reached the coast of Mexico and became a tropical storm, and nothing happened. As for technology, it is something that they have been giving us gradually. For example, I have had the opportunity both for my profession in history and archaeology, as well as the group of which I'm part of, to go to Egypt 18 times. And I have traveled from Alexandria to the border with Sudan in all the ways that can be reached, even by camel. In Egypt, you meet the colossi of Menon. They are quartzite stones of 1,000 tons. Monolithic stones, now they are broken into pieces, but originally it was monolithic stones of 1,000 tons of weight. That is, they were carved from the other side, that is, on the eastern side of the river Nile from the quarries. They pulled the statues, crossed the river Nile from the quarries. They pulled the statues, crossed the river Nile, and took them to the western area. The part of the dead is the Valley of the Dead, the Valley of the Kings, the Valley of the Nobles, all this. They were to place in front of the pylons of the funerary temple of Amenophis III. And on floodable terrain that does not support 1,000 tons of weight, the statue would sink, and then there would be no way to get it out of the hole. However, they took her. Today, we would not dare to do it. How did they do it? The unfinished obelisk in Aswan weighs 1,267 tons. It is a monolithic obelisk, and other equal monoliths of the same size can be clearly seen on the hill. They have already been taken, and some of them are in the Karnak temple in Luxor. Well, how did they get it down there from the hill? And above all, in one piece. Today we cut it into pieces and lower it, but no, back then they took it down in one piece. And what it's more, today if we wanted to move it, it would need several cranes, and they would all get stuck and could not move it. The place is impossible where the slope is. And it is more, if one looks in the direction of the Nile, there's no way to take that obelisk to the river. In other words, the first thing you do, it is a road that connects you directly to the river, but there are none. There are other hills full of stones and everything. I mean, there is no way. You almost have to race it in the air to take it to the river if you want. I mean, there are things that are inexplicable. I mean, in the first dynasties, from the first to the third dynasty, there are some stone amphorae, stone dishes, but made of the hardest stones. We're talking about green diorite. We are talking about quartzite, basalt, granite. But they are globular pitchers with a little mouth of this size, and inside they are completely hollowed out. That is, all the internal material has been removed. With a little hole like that, and it's a gigantic picture. And it has nothing inside. It's totally polished inside. How? Today it's impossible.
How do they invite you?
We do regular group meetings. We do meditation. These days we're going to do meditations, practices, and we are going to see if there is the possibility of communicating with them and that there is an experience like one of these here.
How did you realize that by meditating you could communicate?
We did not realize, but we simply tried. We pretty much came up with the idea. I mean, through meditation, you leave your mind blank, and with the blank mind, you could become receptive to supposedly channel a message. There was no scientific basis. Everything was an excess of enthusiasm, and then it was like playing. It was really like a game that we received a supposed first message. We asked for a proof, and then we went to the desert. We had the sighting, and months later, the ship landed. We saw the crew get off, and then we were able to invite the journalist.
Why is Colombia a favorable place for sightings?
Because all our countries are part from the belt of fire in the Pacific, a violent plate collision. We also have the mountain ranges. Extraordinary energies are moved by the collision of the plates and precisely by the rise of the Andes, and this makes this place where the energy lines of the planet. Remember that the Earth is a living organism. Just as we have meridians, we have a current of energy. That is why acupuncture and compression work. Also, the planet works. And our ancestors also knew that the Earth was a living organism. And that is why in certain places, such as San Agustin, they placed stelae. In the past, they placed menhirs and domes. There are also domes in San Agustin. So many stones nailed in certain places where there are very powerful energy crossings. You mobilize an energy, and that is like an energetic lighthouse. There are places on the planet that interest them, or the same energies or geography of the terrain makes people have a greater predisposition for a superior connection. So they have visited these countries like Colombia, like Peru, Chile, Ecuador, since time immemorials. And that can be seen clearly in the ceramic, can be seen in all the myths and legends of the ancient.
Is there a myth with gold? Is it real or not?
No, because if I see a golden ship that turns on itself, I think that gold is a symbol of the gods. Then everything that is gold connects me with the divinity. There are asteroids that revolve around Jupiter that have more gold than the Earth.
We continue, and I want to ask you, we are on the verge of setting up the first colony on Mars. Would you like to be part of this?
The Earth is such a beautiful planet that in order to go to a planet like Mars, the conditions of Mars would have to be readapted. That is, today there are already projects to create an atmosphere suitable for life in Mars and even generate precipitation in the clouds. You have seen the photograph of the clouds on Mars. A change can be generated. We already have the technology to also generate climate changes.
Should we be afraid of aliens?
Not at all. As I told you, there's a group of aliens who take care of the Earth in a kind of planetary quarantine. The problem is not those who come from outside. The problem is those who are already here, inside. And those beings do not have much power either over humanity. What happens is that they are like specters, and they base control over humanity through information and through fear. That is why the aliens tells us that the only thing to be afraid of is fear itself, because fear is ignorance of not knowing which side of the forces one is on. If you're with the light always shines in the dark.
I read a scientific report of the North American and Europeans who dare to calculate at more or less that in 200 to 300 years will we have the technology to colonize planets similar to Earth?
Much earlier, in the late 19th century, in the New York Patent Office, information was published that said everything that could be invented is invented. You can no longer invent anything new at the end of the 1800s because so many things have been invented that the Patent Office dared to put that nothing new could be invented anymore. And look at everything that has been advanced, and with each advance, he brings himself to a lot of collateral. So I would give much less time than that.
Will we have to develop the theory of the inner war?
Not necessarily. With the energy with plasma engines, we could travel through the universe, and all this would not be so far from reality. Moreover, NASA has named a spacecraft that would work with plasma engines and that would achieve precisely that field that would allow to travel 10 times faster than the speed of light, the USS Enterprise. Scientists also have their romantic side.
Did Atlantis exist?
When Hernan Cortes arrived at Montezuma court, the Aztec king told him, "Great Lord, Quetzalcoatl, Kukulkan, the feathered serpent, as you well know, we are descendants of the ancient Aztlan, a mainland island beyond the seas where herons take flight at dawn." He was referring to the east. Then, how can it be possible that the Aztecs had the memory of that island continent called Aztlan? which coincides both with the account of Plato in the Critias and in the Timaeus and Platon's dialogues. It is not an island that just disappeared like Santorini there in the Mediterranean. It is really a group of islands that, if we return to Pangaea to reconnect the continents before Botswana and Eurasia were divided, we're going to find a space, and that space will be precisely the famous Atlantis.
And were they aliens?
They were mongrels, like mestizos between aliens and human beings from Earth. That is mentioned in chapter 6 of the Genesis and the apocryphal book of Enoch, that says that when man began to populate the earth and the sons of God begot daughters, the angels of heavens joined the daughters of man. Then the mestizos were reunited in 10 islands, the largest of them the island of Undal in the Atlantic Ocean, and the myth of the Atlantis arose.
Sixto, has the Bermuda Triangle also been talked about as an aspect?
As an interdimensional place or portal, you knew that on December 5th of 1945, 5 TBM Avenger fighter bombers made an instruction flight between Florida and Bermuda. It was the famous Flight 19. In command was Lieutenant Taylor, decorated of the Second World War. They were making an instruction flight when suddenly they were enveloped with a bright green phosphorescence. They stopped seeing the sea below them. The instruments went crazy, and an amateur radio from the coast of the United States caught the communications between cuts of the pilots who were totally misplaced. The 5 planes with 10 men in total disappeared. At the time, a Mariner hydroplane with 17 men was sent to look for them. It also disappeared. 500 ships, submarines, aircraft carriers were moved, and not even a fuel stain was found floating on the sea. On December 5th of 1945, 6 planes disappeared, 27 men in total. 46 years later, in May of 91, a group of marine archaeologists who were looking for remains of a galleon just 17 kilometers from the coast of Florida, and at the depth of 200 in the sea, they found 5 TBM Avenger bomber aircrafts stacked side by side, as if someone had taken the trouble to place them there.
Sixto, has the Bermuda Triangle also been talked about as an aspect?
As an interdimensional place or portal, you knew that on December 5th of 1945, 5 TBM Avenger fighter bombers made an instruction flight between Florida and Bermuda. It was the famous Flight 19. In command was Lieutenant Taylor, decorated of the Second World War. They were making an instruction flight when suddenly they were enveloped with a green phosphorescence. They stopped seeing the sea below them. The instruments went crazy, and an amateur radio from the coast of the United States caught the communications between cuts of the pilots who were totally misplaced. The 5 planes with 10 men in total disappeared. At the time, a Mariner hydroplane with 17 men was sent to look for them. It also disappeared. 500 ships, submarines, aircraft carriers were moved, and not even a fuel stain was found floating in the sea. On December 5th of 45, 6 planes disappeared, 27 men in total. 46 years later, in May of 91, a group of marine archaeologists who were looking for remains of a galleon just 17 kilometers from the coast of Florida, and at the depth of 200 in the sea, they found 5 TBM Avenger bomber aircraft stacked side by side, as if someone had taken the trouble to place them there. The cockpits were sealed, so the pilots hadn't jumped out of the planes, but there were no bones inside. When the serial number of the planes was checked, or surprised, they weren't from Flight 19, they were another flight, but a similar flight had never been reported missing. Then, the United States Navy put out a press release that said that TBM Avenger aircraft used by the Navy in the late 40s to early 50s have disappeared under mysterious conditions in the Bermuda Triangle area. Only 134 devices of that model, and that they had only used 5. Now, of other models, they said they prefer not to specify. Another much more interesting case in 1915 in the Bay of Suvla in Gallipoli during the First World War, the first quarter of the British Norfolk Regiment, 250 soldiers and 17 officers were found in the trenches at the head of Hill 60. The Turks armed to their teeth with wire machine guns, mines, etc. Then, behind came the New Zealanders. The whistle sounds. The 267 soldiers of the first quarter of the Norfolk Regiment, they had to immediately advance and make their way through the barbed wire, through the mines. It was going to be a butcher shop. The sky was clear. There was not a single cloud. Suddenly, a cloud in the shape of a bright green loaf of bread begins to materialize. The sense from the place transformed into mist, envelops all the men, then rises, becomes cloud, and again dissipates and disappears from the cloud and the 267 men. After the First World War, the English demanded that the Turks return their first, the wounded, or the bodies of the 1st British Norfolk Regiment, and the Turks said they never fought with those people.
How many areas like that are on air?
12 zones spread over various parts of the planet. One of them is the zone of the silence, in the desert of Durango, in Coahuila and Torreon. The zone of silence because it is an area that was previously the Sea of Tethys, a rise in the seabed, and it is an area that has a lot of magnetite, so it attracts a lot of meteoric impact. So there are many craters and many scattered meteorite remains. This is the amount of mineral that does not allow radio waves to spread or project. So you cannot talk on your cell phone, you cannot watch television or listen to the radio. They call it the zone of silence. There are also interdimensional portals, not only the Bermuda Triangle, also the Dragon Triangle in the Pacific. Several aircraft ships have also disappeared. In any case, the East Air Malaysia plane, which disappeared while you were thinking about it, did not disappear in a Dragon Triangle, nor did it disappear because the aliens hijacked them. That ship was hijacked by dark economic interests, and the plane was taken to a much more secret base than Area 51 in Grumman, Nevada. It was sent to Diego Garcia Island, an island and atoll that belonged to England, and it is leased to the North American government, where it is the top secret base that the United States has. Inside the plane, there was 4 Chinese engineers who had developed a patent for the liquid metal in which information can be recorded. That is, not only were they conductors of energy and electricity, but it was like a metal, like in the Terminator movie. You can break the object, and the object returns to its shape. The object is impressive. It was incredible what could be achieved with this patent. When these 4 Chinese engineers disappeared, and the one who holds this patent now becomes the most powerful man on the planet, that is, Jacob Rothschild. He was the 5th owner of the patent. So, how convenient that the 4 Chinese disappeared.
Well, my friends, I hope that you have been well documented.